Okay, well, welcome back to the next installment of the Wealth Optimizer training series. In this particular one, we're going to be looking at appreciation, right? That's the fourth benefit. So cash flow, principal reduction, depreciation, the tax benefits, and appreciation. And we've titled this one, Investment Property Laughs at Inflation. And quick disclaimer on this one. This is not something I've learned from a book or from seminars or anything like that. This is something that, by virtue of being involved in the Wealth Optimizer project, doing research, studying, asking questions, came up with some amazing insights. And so the disclaimer is, check my math, right? I'd much rather be proven wrong at this point when we're talking about stuff on paper than make big investment decisions and then figure out, oops, made a math mistake. I don't think I did, and I'll show you why that's the case. But I'm going to show you some pretty amazing things as we look at how appreciation works and how real estate serves as a hedge against inflation. And so let's get into it. The thing I want to look at this with you is Back to the Future. If you think about the movies, they came out, I think, in about 1985, right? That's when Marty McFly and Doc Brown, they start in 1985 and then they go back 30 years and forward 30 years. And forward 30 years put us in 2015. Well, that was only 3 years ago. And if you recall, Amazon actually had all three movies on the date of 2015. And so you could watch and almost have this time warp experience watching in 2015 Doc and Marty go back and forth. So we're going to use that, and it works quite well. So to set the stage, let's hear it.
Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future.
All right, so here we go. Again, standard disclaimer, we are not tax or legal experts. Seek your advisors for help. Again, this is to ask the questions and think through these things, and so that you can make the best decisions possible, and also for your clients to make the best decisions possible. A couple of sites we're going to be using is the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. This is called fred.stlouisfed.org, and then we'll also look at the usinflationcalculator.com. If you go on the Fred site, there is just a wealth of information. There's indexes like crazy, from consumer price index to the housing price index to labor rates and just everything you can imagine, a lot of it coming off of census data, but we're going to look at a few of those charts. So one of the things you'll find on the Fred site, this is actually what a housing price index looks like for Sioux Falls. And you can find this if your market is of any size, right? Sioux Falls is 250,000 people. We have the housing price index. So certainly Phoenix, Denver, Seattle, any of those you will find. What's interesting, I'm going to look at a few of these with you, but you'll notice the gray lines here are marked out as recessions. And so you see that big fat gray line, that's the Great Recession, right, of 2009 and 10. Notice what happens with the housing prices. It comes down a little bit for Sioux Falls, and then it continues back up. It flattens out, we get a little bit of a retraction, but Sioux Falls is generally conservative. We're not speculating on a bunch of real estate. We don't see massive spikes, but when things retract, yeah, okay, it flattens out a little bit, but we're not getting hammered. But notice, if you drew a line from the present and just kind of followed that through, we didn't lose anything, right? If we just hung out, stayed steady, everything that was lost during the recession has come back, and it's like the recession never even happened. Okay? And you're going to see that in several more markets. So let's look at a few more. So here's Phoenix. Phoenix is fascinating. Phoenix is like this massive run-up in 2005 before the recession. I think I figured out in 1 year there's like a 57% appreciation rate. Just ridiculous. If you see something like this, what are the chances it's going to be followed by something like this, right? That was unsustainable. We all know that now, but you can see it on the chart. What I find fascinating here is this is happening 3 years before the recession. And it tips over before the recession, perhaps maybe even causing some of the recession, right? You almost see the housing crisis happening on the graph here. But notice, so it collapses, but notice where we are today. If we drew a line straight here, we could just get rid of all that drama. If I had a property, I owned it since 2000 and I owned it today, my appreciation rate is the same as it ever was, right? We can just get rid of all that goofiness that happened in 2010 through 15, and we're right back on track. Then let's take a look at a market like Denver. Denver took a bit of a decline during or even before the recession, you see that tipping over here in 2005 and 6. It's starting to retract, and then it's taken a massive climb upward. Denver's done very well. It's an extremely hot housing market. Next thing we want to look at is the Consumer Price Index. This is essentially the government's attempt at measuring the changes in price of goods over time. And so if we take a loaf of bread or a gallon of gas or whatever it is, we look at the price here, we look at it next month and the following month and the following month, and we measure those changes over time, put that all together, and we say, hey, listen, this is the movement of price over time. This is the measure of inflation. Again, you see that there was a dip in prices during the recession, not a ton, but then it continued on, and this is our inflation rate as we go. The Consumer Price Index. Now, the thing I want to talk about is, before we get into how to do this the easy way, I want to take you back and talk to you about how to do it the hard way. And the point is not to make this difficult, but if you understand the underground, the underpinnings of how these things are calculated, you'll be able to calculate indexes for anything, right? As opposed to trying to go online and finding the exact calculator that you need, you can do it yourself. So we're going to take a little bit of time, dive in deep into how to calculate this. If this is going to go right over your head, that's fine. This stuff will be in the Wealth Optimizer tool. There's also cheat ways to do it, right? I'll show you the websites to do that with. But I want to talk to you on how this is calculated. All right, so let's look at it. And we also want to check our math on this. So how we go about calculating how much a price has increased, it's all about relative to how much time. So we have to look at a point in time compared to a later point in time, and we can measure how much that price has increased or decreased over a period of time. And so to do that, I've used the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, for August of 2017 back to August of 2087. So it's a 30-year time span. And what we do, and I'm going to show you this on the computer, we're starting with the near point in time. So the time that's closest to us. We want to find out what that point is. So if we pull up the FRED and we look at the Consumer Price Index, and you can just search that in here and you can find your own market or the Consumer Price Index. We'll talk about your market here in a minute. But this will be a way that you can calculate the Housing Price Index for your market. As we hover over all these points, you can see the different dates and times. So we're looking for August of 1987. We find out what that point is. We write it down, for 114.3, and then we go to August of 2017, 245.26, and we come back, and for whatever reason I got my number wrong here, but that's okay, it's close enough that we'll get the point. We take the point of time that's closest to us, so August of 2017, we write that down, and we subtract from it the distant point in time. So we subtract the 114.3, and the result is 130.73. This is not dollars, this is not percents, it's just an index. We take the result, the 130, and divide it by the far point in time, the 114.3. So 130 divided by 114. The result then is 1.14. Has nothing to do with this 114, okay? It's completely different, it's just a coincidence. We take the 1.14 times it by 100, we get 114%. What that means is that during this period of time, the price has increased by 114%. What would cost $1 in 1987 now costs $2.14. It's the dollar plus another $1.14. The next step, if we can take it to the next level, is if we divide it by the period of time, the 30 years, we determine that over that 30-year span, prices have increased on average per year 3.81%. Now that's a simple calculation versus a complex. So this is not complex interest, right? This is not 3.81% on top of 3.18% on top of 3.81%. This is just 30 years, 114% divided by 30 segments. Okay, it gives us 3.81% per year. That's how that calculation is done. Now let's go over to the inflation, the U.S. inflation calculator. It's just an online tool. And we put in 1987. If in 1987, our start date, I purchased an item for $1, then in 2017, that same item would cost $2.16, which was an increase of 115.8%. Now, what was our calculation? We calculated it at 114%, and they're saying 116%. So we're really close, and that's probably because I got my little math number wrong. Also, I'm calculating August. I don't know when they're calculating, right? They could be January, it could be December of those years, and that's going to make a bit of a change. Okay, so I've showed you how to use basic math to calculate off of pretty much any index in Fred. Now let's go look at how to do it on a property on a home appreciation. So I'll actually do this in the class. I'll give people an opportunity to pick a city, then pick a time between 2010 and 17, kind of give them some parameters so it doesn't get crazy, and pick another time between 1980 and 2000. If you go past 1980, sometimes some cities don't have. If you go that far back, sometimes the records aren't there. So you're pretty safe if you stick after 1980. And then you go find the information that we decided. So for this example, what I did is I picked 2000 in Sioux Falls. So we're looking at under Fred, all transactions, house price index for Sioux Falls, South Dakota, MSA. And we want to look at Q1 of the year 2000. So go find that on our map here. So I've got 121.98. That's my FAR price, or that's not my price, it's my FAR index. So there I'm going to enter 121.98 into my little calculator. And then we're going to go find, Sioux Falls. Let's go find 2017, and we want to go Q4 of 2017 so that we get the full year. And that is 215.16. So we'll put 215.16 in the near point, right? That's the one that's closest to us. We'll put 212.98 in the past point, and then we have to enter that this is a 17-year period, right? 2017 is 17 years. So the math here then is 215 minus 221 equals 93, divided by the 221 equals 0.76, times 100, we get 76.39. That right there is the amount of inflation or appreciation over those 17 years, with 76% appreciation over those 17 years. If we want to take it that next step, we can divide it by the number of years, by the 17 years, gives us an average about 4.5% appreciation over that period of time. Or we can even take it one step further and say, okay, if I bought a house at $100,000 in 2000, what's it going to be worth in 2017? Well, $176,000, right? Just $100,000 times whatever the appreciation was over that period of time. Now, the question is this all just mumbo jumbo, and did we get our math right? Right? So let's double check. Let me take you over to a website called the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and that's essentially going to be fhfa.gov. And under here, I've already set this up, but let's go Sioux Falls, purchase quarter, 2000 Q1, right? That's what we did. The valuation quarter, or the quarter that we're going to sell it in, Q4 2017, we bought it for $100,000, hit calculate, and what's the value of that house 17 years later? Well, $176,390. And what did we say it was? That's what we said it was, within a few pennies. Okay? So we've learned how to calculate any index, regardless if there's a cool tool online that we can use or not. We have the ability now to calculate it very simply. If we want to find a tool to do it, that's fine too. But what we're trying to do, and I'm not sure it's quite done yet at this point in time, is we're trying to build this in for your city into Wealth Optimizers. How cool would that be? We take the index, we build it in for Seattle, for Denver, for Portland, for whatever city you're in, and now when you're evaluating these things, hey, my investor bought it in 2005, it's now 2018, what's the value, right? And each year we can keep updating that for the entire database, and every time we do that, you have the newest and latest information. Perhaps the market goes down, right? Maybe we have another recession on the horizon. Maybe it actually goes in reverse. Well, now we know what that is. So next, let's take a look at some of these other items. So in the past 30 years, I did some calculations. We talked about the consumer price index already at 3.81%. New York was appreciation over the same time period of 4.78%. Phoenix Even though we had that massive disruption during the recession, still 6.04%. Sioux Falls, 6.25%. Minneapolis, pretty much the same. But Denver, look at Denver, almost 11%. When I saw that, I was like, man, that's incredible. That's 11% per year over 30 years, right? That's not a short time span either. And look at Seattle, nearly 16% every single year for 30 years. That's an incredible, incredible appreciation rate. All right, so let's take a look at how this works if we were able to get in the DeLorean and go back to 1985 and fast forward into 2015. Let's see what would happen if we had that ability. Because we do have the data now. We have the data from 1985 to 2015. So let's take a look at it. So Back to the Future. Doc Brown and Marty McFly travel from 1985 to 2015. Marty decides to take $1 with the cost of a sandwich in 1985. Doc brings a sandwich along. Then in 2015, Marty finds that a sandwich now costs $2.15 or 16 cents. And we know that because we have the consumer price index for that period of time. We know that inflation was 116% over that 30-year period. And so quite frankly, that dollar that Marty has is only going to buy him a half a sandwich in 2015. But Doc's $1 sandwich is now worth $2.16, right? He can either eat it or he could sell it for double what he paid for it in the past. So the lesson here is cash is king, except for when we're traveling to the future. When you go into the future, it's better to take assets rather than cash. Well, why do we say cash is king? Well, cash is king is because, one, you need cash to buy something. So if there's something on sale and there's a good deal, the guy with cash is the person that's going to be able to buy it. And the second thing is cash is like blood, right? It's the thing that keeps real estate afloat. It keeps businesses afloat. If you run out of blood, you're dead, right? It's like oil. It's like lubrication to keep an engine going. If you run out of lube, it is going to seize up and it's going to quit. It's going to wreck the motor. And so that's why cash is king. But in terms of building wealth, cash doesn't build wealth, right? You have a pile of cash there, and it's going to be worth less when you walk out the door than it was 10 minutes ago. So cash is not going to get us there. We need assets to build wealth as we go into the future. Cash is important, but it won't build us wealth. So let's take a look at the second trip that they make. Let's look at in terms of home appreciation, though, in this time, not sandwiches. So in this case, Marty takes a briefcase filled with $100,000 in cash. Doc takes the deed to his $100,000 home that he bought in Sioux Falls. Okay, put in your own market. Doesn't matter what market. But in 2015, 30 years later, Marty jumps out of that DeLorean, and he's still got his $100,000 in cash, okay, that he can go spend. Doc runs down to his local RE/MAX or Century 21 agency and sells his house for $288,000. That's the difference, right? That's what house appreciation has done in Sioux Falls over the last 30 years. It's turned Doc's $100,000 house into $280,000. Well, let's do this again. Marty's getting smarter, okay? Marty's getting smarter. Instead of taking $100,000 in cash, he takes out a CD at the bank at 3.81% simple interest. Why does he do that? Well, it's essentially indexed for inflation. He doesn't want to get stuck like he did the last trip with money or a sandwich that's only worth half what it was before. Doc, on the other hand, takes a deed on a $500,000 house that he paid $100,000 down for, right? We talked about this in the cash flow and principal reduction class. $100,000 is 20% down, right? We could do that all day long. 20% down on a $500,000 house. Fast forward, 2015. Marty cashes in his CD for $214,000. Okay, he thinks he did pretty good. Essentially what he's done is he's indexed it for inflation. He can't buy anything more in 2015 than he could in 1985. The same amount is going to buy, all he's done is he's protected his money against inflation, which is good, but it's not as good as what Doc did. Doc goes and sells his house for $1.4 million. He tells his property manager, right? He hires Real Property Management. He says, before he leaves in 1985, he says, Mr. Property Manager, I want you to rent my home. I want you to pay the insurance, the taxes. I want you to take care of the property, pay the mortgage, and you can keep whatever's left. I don't want to see a dime of it. No cash flow, right? Just make sure all the bills are paid. In 30 years, he walks away with $1.4 million, having done nothing except for put his $100,000 down on a deed for a house in Sioux Falls. And so I have to imagine this is what Doc would say.
Great Scott.
Indeed. So in the past 30 years, in Sioux Falls, the housing price index has outperformed the consumer price index by nearly 64%. So what's interesting is I used to think that, well, in the past, somebody told me that real estate is a hedge against inflation. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I thought, oh, I bet I understand why. Simply because as money becomes worth less and less over time, real estate is real property, it's real stuff. And so it just kind of follows along with inflation. So that's what I was always figuring, that housing would follow inflation. Well, that's somewhat true, but in Sioux Falls, it's outperformed inflation. And I can tell you in Denver and Seattle, it's done even better than inflation, right? Even New York at 4-point-something%, it did better than inflation. And so real estate as a hedge against inflation, it's even leverage against inflation. So let's take a look at the fourth trip. In this case, in 1985, Doc buys his $500,000 house, but he does it in Denver this time. He's getting a little more savvy. Sioux Falls market, maybe not quite as hot. He pays that same $100,000 in cash. In 2015, he goes and sells in Denver that house for $2.1 million, which is over a $2,000 return on investment during that period. That's like 71% return per year. When I did the math on this, I'm like, I don't even know if I can share this with people because it seems unreal, right? This is unreal. Seattle, right? We looked at Denver at 11%, Seattle's at 16%. Let's do Seattle numbers. I don't even want to know what it would be because I don't even think I could sell it to somebody. They'd say, no, it's too good to be true. But this is what the math tells us. And I have to imagine this is what Doc and Marty might be thinking when we showed them this number.
But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! Great Scott! What the hell is a gigawatt?
Indeed, what is a gigawatt, right? This is ridiculous how much these properties have produced in wealth over time. Okay, so the next question then is the appreciation in our personal home, does that build wealth for us? Well, let's stop and think about it once. Is our personal home an asset or a liability? Well, if you ask your banker, your personal home is an asset, right? It's going to go in the asset column of your balance sheet. But if you talk to somebody like Robert Kiyosaki, if you're reading his book, he's like, well, does it take money out of your pocket or put money into your pocket each month? Well, a home, if we stop to think about it, definitely takes money out of my pocket, right? In repairs and electric and the mortgage and all that stuff. So it's kind of a liability. So let's think about this. If we purchase a $100,000 home with 1,000 square feet, it's about $100 a square foot is what the cost is. And we sell it for $130,000 in 10 years. How many square foot home can we now afford in our new home? Trick question, right? If we think of it as $100 a square foot, and we sold it for $130,000, can we buy a 1,300 foot square home? The answer is no, but why not? The reason is because even though our home appreciated in value, so did everybody else's home. So we sold it for $130,000, but we turn around and we want to buy a bigger home, but wait a minute, all the bigger homes cost more money too. And so we find that we can only afford to buy about the same priced home as the one we sold. And it's about the same size. It's no bigger, it's no fancier. A personal home really doesn't build wealth the way a rental property does because we still need a place to live. Our only choice really is, do we want to live in a fancy home or a not so fancy home, right? We have to pay for housing somehow unless we live under a bridge. Even if we live in a tent, we're going to pay in lot rent to the KOA. So somehow we're going to pay for housing. The only way that we can save money on housing is to not have such a fancy home, but it doesn't really build wealth the same way rental property does. So in summary, again, what benefit does everybody focus on in rental property? And it's the cash flow. So what benefits are hidden? Well, the appreciation, the depreciation, and the principal reduction. All those things are the stuff that we're trying to pull back the curtain on. We're trying to open the black box of real estate with Wealth Optimizer and show your clients, to show you what this thing we call real estate and investment property does for us. Because so many of these things are hidden, we can't see them. We want to show them off so that when we have to replace the toilet valve, when we have to evict a tenant, when a tenant doesn't pay rent on time, we're like, yeah, okay, that's painful, but so what? Look at all the benefits, right? Or the tenant calls to complain. Well, couldn't we take the tenant's phone call once in a while? Is it really going to kill us to take their phone call when they're buying us the property, right? They're paying rent, they're buying us the property, they're making us rich. We can take their phone call. And so that's the kind of disposition that we want to get with Wealth Optimizer. To close this one, give you just a quick real-life example. So this is the property that I did. Purchased an owner-occupied duplex, paid $173,000 for it. The loan that we got was a 3.5% down. This was something where if you were owner-occupied, and I think this is still available in an FHA-style loan, 3.5% down. I'm a realtor, so I represented my side of the commission of the transaction. So I got the 3% buyer's commission as a realtor. So that was $5,100 or $5,200. Then, because taxes are often paid in arrears, the seller ends up paying the taxes forward. So there's another $800 that goes on the closing statement. At the end of the day, I ended up paying $50 for this house. Literally, that was my cash out of pocket, $50. In 30 years, I calculated this out. If I make no cash flow, okay, no cash flow, 30 years, it's worth about $500,000 plus an extra $48,000 in tax benefits. The total at retirement that it's worth, that the value I've extracted from this property, almost $550,000. Now, to be fair, right, I may have to pay some of that depreciation back if I sold it. And to be fair, I want to adjust it for inflation. Because at the end of the day, yeah, $550 looks good today, but in 30 years, it's not going to buy $550 worth of stuff. Adjust it for inflation, it would buy about $253,000 worth of stuff. So at the end of the day, I spent $50 in today's money in order that in 30 years, I have about $250,000 in value. Okay, that's what real estate can do for us if we understand what's going on. And this is what real estate's doing for our clients, right? This is the business that we're in property management and asset management, is we're helping build our clients' wealth, their legacy, their retirement, their future. That's the perspective that we want to have with Wealth Optimizer. And now you maybe understand a little bit what I was talking about in the first couple sessions, where I said this is a philosophy, this is not a tool, right? We've talked very little about the tool, right? That's coming. But we've talked about the philosophy of why real estate makes sense and why people invest in real estate and why this has made people wealthy over time. And if we understand it, we can help people along the way.